Yo, yo, what's up? It's release day! It's release day! Oh, yeah!
Woo!
A remix EP. How does that feel, Ian?
Fucking amazing, man. So much fire on that remix EP. You crushed it. Opiuo crushed it. Champagne. Everybody just smashed it. It's like, I love all the different bassy vibes. We got drum and bass. We got like left field bass. And then we even got a little techno in there. Some boots and cats, you know?
Came together well. And I gotta say, the team at Mother Wolf are so cool. Like your whole new management and Mother Wolf, I just get such a great vibe from those people. And like a lot of record labels and management teams, I do not get a great vibe from. So you done good, Ian. You done good. You know how to pick them. Yeah.
Big facts, man. Yo, quick shout out to my manager, Matt Ekstrom. He's just been crushing it on like blog placements and just showing mad love overall. Just extremely helpful. It's, you know, he and I recently just started working together, and it's just so nice to have somebody in your corner who's like on the same wavelength in terms of, you know, not only like musical ambitions, but just as a person. And so, yeah, it's just really beautiful to bring those different communities together, from Mother Wolf to like your team. It's also amazing. And yeah, it's really beautiful to watch it all grow.
I'm super stoked. It's it really feels good, like that release, like, you know, when you listen to, because it's like, you know, when you're making music with vocals or like, you know, kind of pop sensibilities, it's either like great or it's terrible usually. And it's like, it's so nice when you see it come together. Because like when I first started making music, I would look at people who are making like, you know, pop sounding stuff and be like, oh, that's so simple, that's so easy, that's so basic, whatever. And I would look down my nose at it until I actually tried to do it myself in a way that I could respect. Right. And holy shit, that struggle is real, man. Like that is a real balancing act. And you know, when it comes together and it comes together well, and you know that like there are lots of people out there that, you know, like a feather is their happy place. It feels great, man. Like it really, really does.
It's like a very uplifting, you know, this section, especially when the chorus comes in. You just go, ah. It's amazing.
It's like, especially now, like this is, what is this, March 12th, 2021. We are at hopefully the tail end of COVID, but it has been hopefully such a hardcore time that it's, I don't know, like when I was making music, like at first I was like kind of making pretty gloomy, like, I'm stuck in my house and it's COVID music. But now it's like, I find that the happy music, it really is what the world needs. And I think we're giving them what they need right now. That's good. That's good vibes. So let's talk about the Eko Zu project. It has been, you know, a while, but you've been lurking behind the scenes for a long time. Why don't you like how and when did you get into music, and like, you know, what was the incubation period like for Eko Zu?
It's been a long time in the process. It's been, I think my earliest memories are of being at like a Ramones concert with my parents. My dad was in a punk rock band, so he played the bass, and I saw him and his band opening for Social Distortion when I was like probably 3 years old or so.
Hella cool. That's
pretty crazy. Awesome. Yeah, I was a baby with a mohawk, probably something like what Asha will have not before too long. Yeah, and so earliest memories are of being at concerts and stuff, you know, smoky punk rock venues, which was the formative, very formative era. And man, music has just always been the thing for me. I guess I never envisioned or could even see myself doing anything else for the rest of my life. And I was in band and orchestra, of course, like in middle school and high school. But then I was also in rock bands playing guitar. My hair was down to my shoulders in middle and high school, which was great. I was living in Wisconsin at the time, and I really knew that if I wanted to take it to the next level, that I would have to go far, far, far away. And ended up in the Bay Area going to school at Expression College. Yo, the Bay. Yep. In 2005, I moved to the Bay Area and like reinvented myself basically. I lived in the Bay from 2005 to 2018 or so. But in that period of time, I went to school for sound engineering, which when I first applied to the school, I didn't really know what a sound engineer was. I basically was like, I'm going to go to school to make my own music sound better. And kind of thought, I guess, that I would be going to what would now be like a production-oriented school, whereas this one was more like, this is how you mix a band, and this is how you set up a microphone, and this is how you work, a massive console that's the size of my bedroom. And this is how you mix, audio for movies and stuff. And so it was still extremely helpful, but the music side of things I just kept doing on the side. And when I graduated from college, my dream growing up had been to make music for video games. I was inspired by like Nobuo Uematsu, who did all the music for Final Fantasy, the whole series.
That was like 1 octave, 2 octaves, 3 octaves, 4, and it was just like the simplest composition, but it worked, man. It worked.
Yeah, man, and it just touches right on the heartstrings, and like I feel like that stuff still really inspires my music today, where like just the big arpeggios and like massive chords and just big, heart-wrenching sounds that's still a deep part of me. And when I got out of college, I managed to land an internship at Namco, which is they made Pac-Man and stuff, which was awesome. Mm-hmm.
We're graffitiing it to say "fuck man."
Nice.
And they were like, "Oh, we need to change that to Pac-Man."
Yeah. Yep. Yes. So that was a nice transition, but I got really disenchanted with making music for video games pretty quickly because it was still a corporate environment at the end of the day. I was doing sound and music for mobile games like iPhone and PC and stuff from Namco, but I wasn't working on their AAA titles. But that's when I first started using Ableton. My buddy turned me onto it, and when it was probably Live 8, represent. Hey, whoop. With the Bounce hoodie, too. Shout out to iLL.Gates, Stephon Jacobs.
And Mayor Apeshit. Love you guys.
Mm-hmm. But it was weird. I was making music for somebody else, basically, and some of the producers weren't really the best at articulating what they were looking for. I wasn't really that passionate about the games that I was working on.
Ow. Could you just give it more pow? Just zhuzh it up a little bit. Shit like that. Like the most useless feedback.
Dude, it's just like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And so,
we're not artists, but they think that their ideas are as good as the ideas an artist would come up with. And then they think that you're shitty when their shitty ideas look shitty because they're shitty ideas.
And then it's your job to bring their shitty ideas to life, regardless of how shitty or good they are. Yeah, good times. I mean, we had some amazing producers there as well. And I still talk to some of those guys today. And it was a great learning experience. And I got I was in Ableton at that point 40 hours a week. And so I just learned so much. Yeah. I mean, these days I put in probably way more than 40 hours a week into Ableton. But at the time, it was so helpful to just kind of get into it. But I got laid off from Namco in probably 2012, along with almost the whole company, because they were moving almost all of their production back to Japan. And so basically everybody got laid off, which was a blessing curse, mostly a blessing, because I was already at the time, I was just like, this is not really doing it for me. And I was moonlighting as a live sound engineer at like Yoshi's Jazz Club. So I was working with funk bands. I got to work with P-Funk. I got to work with Maceo Parker, like Sheila E. Fucking just this crazy all-star cast, which was phenomenal. And so then doing live sound kind of became my thing. It was just like working at venues like 1015, you know, the Boom Boom Room. And just really putting in the hours behind the mixing board. And I guess that's sort of when my focus shifted, at least temporarily, to being more of an engineer. And I was still producing a little bit on my own, but it was hard to keep to do both. Luckily, I met up with PK Sound at one point, which is how PK represent. That's how Dylan and I originally connected, was through those guys, and started working shows and festivals with them. I did Lightning in a Bottle in like 2014 or 15, which was my first huge festival working with PK. And yeah, I guess I did all right because they brought me on as like one of their main team members, and they sent me out on the Glitch Mob tour as the front of house engineer, which is like yeah. So man, that just kind of started everything, because working really closely with Ed, Edit, and like Ua and Beretta, and just I did basically 2 years on the road with them all around Europe and the US and Canada. And man, it blew my mind seeing the way that they worked. And they were a 3-piece, and I was like, fuck, I got so inspired by them. I was like, I think it's time for me to start my own project as a group. And so 2 of my best friends, the girls from Astrologic, the homegirls, I reached out to them and I was like, yeah, I was like, I really want to start this project up. Like, I love the way that you two sing and play guitar. Like, it'd be great to get kind of a hybrid fusion sound of like sort of a pop soul sensibility mixed with like dance music. And we started with house music, which is very accessible. And it's a good way to start because it's like, it's a really straightforward drum beat. It's pretty easy to just sort of follow the formula and just get your feet wet and start to feel out how to mix and stuff. And yeah, man, I mean, we made a bunch of really dope tunes together. We had a couple successes early on. Most of our first tunes didn't really reach anybody's ears. I was really diligently trying to find a label for our first EP, and Barretto was just like, dude, just put it out there, like, don't even worry about it. You know. And at the time I was like, but this is my first release, like, it needs to be fucking perfect. And he was just like, bro, just send it.
You know, like, a lot of artists will give their power away by thinking that they need a label, especially to get started. And if you haven't got things popping yet, it's really hard for a label. Because, I mean, even with an artist that's like great, it is hard to make money off of streams, man. Like, back when people were selling, you know, physical music or even MP3s, it was a lot more profitable. But now all the power is in the like tech companies like Spotify and Apple. And, you know, when a label is looking at an artist, it's like their music might be great, but if that label has to like build that artist, they don't have time for that. You know, they don't have time for that. But once you can release your own music and prove that there's a viable fan base and everything, you know, then they'll be coming to you and you'll be in a much better position. So that's excellent advice from Beretta. And you know, if you want more info about self-releasing, you should check out the weekly download that Spiderhound did on self-releasing that is in the weekly download, which is, if you're not a member, it's theweeklydownload.com. It's a huge archive of stuff. We can talk about that later. And then there's another one where our friend Cheyenne came on. She's an excellent PR person, and she basically was like, "Hey, this is what people are doing with PR campaigns. It's not magic. Like, here's your checklist. Do this." And if you basically just watch those 2 videos, you'll be able to do it and get started and get your music distributed and everything. So don't give your power away, people. Don't give your power away. You can do it.
Big facts. Yeah, and that's partly why I love what you guys are doing with the dojo as well, because you kind of provide a bridge for people to see what is happening between like finishing a song and putting out a song. And then with the dojo label, you also have this like built-in community of people who are going to support and like repost it and show other, you know, record labels or potential booking agents, etc., that like you're part of a community that's going to support you. And
we have people's debut releases hit #1 like really regularly, you know. Like, shout out to everyone who buys the dojo music, because we really appreciate it. And like, you know, as a new artist, when you put out your first release and you get that rush of support, like that feeling is just like, it's crazy. So I remember before we did Buy a Thread, when you were like, "Hey, check out some of my music, you know, I'm self-releasing out this new project," because I had known you as a sound engineer and everything, and then as a dojo member with them, you were like, "Hey, check this out," and I go over to your SoundCloud, and there's tracks in the hundreds of thousands of plays. I was like, "Oh, damn, what's up, Ian?" So how did it feel the first time you had one of your tracks cross 100,000 plays?
My first reaction was that there was some sort of error or like glitch in the system. I was like, there's no way that this is possible. You know, and then it slowly sunk in. I mean, I have this kind of weird contentious relationship with success where as soon as I hit a milestone, I'm just like already on to the next thing. And so it's hard for me to like bask.
That's ambition. That's something you need, man. That's called ambition, and I fully support that.
Which is partly why it's really great that we're having this conversation right now, because it's like these new remixes just came out. You know, it's like kind of a moment to just pause and like be appreciative for how this all came together, and to just kind of like be able to reflect on it and not just be like, okay, cool, like that's great, but I got like these other 5 songs that I really need to finish up now. And so, yeah, I guess like I was really, really stoked when we first hit that milestone of like 200,000 plays on SoundCloud or something. But before the end of the day, I was already like, okay, that's great, but like, what's next? And it took us a couple releases after that to sort of recreate that sort of momentum, because sometimes you'll have a really successful release and you'll be really juiced by it, but then your next couple releases they'll still get good traction, but they won't get like that same level of traction and attention. And then it's like, it's easy to get kind of discouraged by that. But you got to have that grit.
Momentum and endurance are for real like the name of the game, man. Like you gotta be ready to grind, and you gotta love the grind, man. Like it's one thing that I noticed almost immediately when we were working in the studio, was that you love the grind, man. You frequently put more than 100 hours into like most of your tracks, and I know there's a lot of people out there who like, you know, they're bored after like 4 hours, you know. So are you just like a masochist, or what is it like? How does one learn to love the grind like Ian?
I mean, there's plenty of tracks that ended up in the graveyard for me. You know, I think it's like the tunes that you really love are the ones that you're naturally gonna just grind through. And it's such a balance, man, because like that last 20%, 15%, it's like that kills more songs for most producers than I would say any stage of the process, because it's like the honeymoon phase of making music. It's like that first initial spark, like up until about halfway through the track, and then you're so excited about what the song could be, and it's just like kind of pie in the sky ideas, and then it's like the cold fucking reality of like finishing something, you know, that last 15% grind is like, that's where you can easily put in half or more of your hours.
Mixing.
Yeah, man. And so luckily that's partly why I love working on songs with vocals, is because that element kind of keeps me engaged. Especially working with like vocalists like Kill Will, you know, or the Trito. Yeah, dude, the boy is a beast, man. Like, definitely check out Kill Will's music, aka Will Champlin. He has a bunch of projects that he's juggling right now, but like, he's a brilliant songwriter, lyricist, and a producer, and so he and I work really well together because I feel like we complement each other. But that helps, man. It's like just having a vocal, like a top line that gives you chills every time that you hear it. That goes a long way to staying engaged with the tune. And also having like melody or like some sort of chord progression, because I've stalled out on a lot of tracks where they were just purely drop driven and didn't really have like the rest of the frame of the song with a nice chord progression or like a nice motif or something to latch on to. Just having that sort of being grounded by the melody of the song and then using that to drive the drop. Like, I'll usually start with like a nice build section or a nice chorus, and then I'll make the drop afterwards, because for me it's a lot easier to just like take dope elements and then just like throw a fat beat and an 808 under them or whatever. Yeah.
My tracks also come together best when I write the drop last. And then it almost feels like remixing, you know, because like a lot of the time when you remix a song, you know, there's kind of like a set melodic structure or set vocal that is the essence of the song, and then the remixes are just like different drops on it, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll write like 3 or 4 different drops in like completely different genres of music until I like find the one that works. But coming up with a drop for a build-up is a lot easier than coming up with a build-up for a drop, I think.
Totally. Yeah. And I love it with the Like a Feather remix. You sent me like 3 drop ideas before before settling on the one that you ultimately went for, which was really cool to just see kind of the process come together.
A lot, sometimes to the point that it gets like really ridiculous. Like I just did this one for Ionize and like 42 Doug and stuff, and I made like a house version. I made like a weird like old school New York electro version, and then the version that I ended up finishing sounded like a fusion of like hardcore, like hard style Rotterdam and hip hop, and I was just like, yes. These are so different from each other, but sometimes you gotta make the first pancake to learn how the pan works.
That's right, man. I love it.
I feel like one of the things that for me that gets me through when it's a grind is having like a really clear vision and a really clear sense of definite purpose. And that's something that I really get from your project. You know, there's like design aesthetic, there's this like animated world going on, everything is just like very, very intentional. And even like, you know, the cover art for Like a Feather, I don't know who did that, but it obviously took a really long time to make that cover art. Can you talk a little bit about like how you developed your vision for the project, and like, you know, how like what motivates you and what makes that project necessary, what makes that vision necessary?
It's changed a lot. I think with any new project, it's really easy to feel like you have to figure out everything all at once and be really deliberate with everything from the start. Where the project, where Eko Zu started, was with me and the girls, and the guitar player and I had these masks, these cool custom created, like I had a lion mask, she had a tiger mask, like we would never take our masks off in public. It's like kind of a Daft Punk thing. And then our vocalist, she had a bird wing, but she didn't have a mask on because like we were like, well, we need a face for the project. And it was really fun, and kind of the idea was we were at our friend's wedding, which she had at the San Francisco Zoo. The reception was at the zoo. It was really beautiful. And the girls were performing for the reception, and there was monkeys that were all around us. And while the girls were singing and playing, the monkeys started like going, ah, 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 and like singing along, basically. Or that's what we said. We're like, oh, they're joining in, you know? And so it was just fucking wild. And that was before we'd named the project or anything. And in the reception, there were these animal masks that were on the tabletops, one for every person. And then after dinner, everybody put on the masks and everybody just got the fuck down. The groom was DJing, and we were just like, this is amazing. Like, it's just a lot more easy to feel free. Like, you can just kind of be yourself when there's a little bit of anonymity to it.
Psychological studies on it, and like when people are anonymous when they're partying, they get like orders of magnitude more debaucherous. Like that's just how it is, you know?
Yeah, I could totally see that. And so that was sort of the driving theme behind where Eko Zu started. And we kept that going for a while, even though it was really hard, to perform in a mask. Like, shout out to, Dead Mouse and Pink Panda and like Marshmello and all those guys, Daft Punk, for performing in masks. Cause it kind of sucks. It's fucking hard. And it's like, it's tough for photos because you can't show like any facial expression. And so all the photos kind of look the same, and it's sweaty and it's kind of hard to see. And, but we kept it up for quite a while, and we were just like, we really believed this could work. And then when the girls, they decided to leave Eko Zu in like the beginning of 2018. We were all living together at the time, and it was just really tough creatively. We kind of had like a breakdown. And yeah, it was just one of those things where it's like, okay, maybe this is not really the fit. Like, it's all love, but they wanted to move back to the Bay Area and be with their families also, which I completely understand. And it's also just tough living with your bandmates who are also your best friends. And like, so it was a pretty tall order, but when they left, I had a bit of an identity crisis, not only for myself, but also for the project, because I was just like, is it possible to continue this project? Because like, I felt like we were losing the face and the heart of Eko Zu. Because Chen, our guitar player, she's just such a burning soul. It's really
recording the guitars for By a Thread, like it just seems so easy for her. You know? It's just like, oh, it's amazing.
I know.
And we didn't really have to do that much treatment to those guitars either. Like it was just a really nice recording of really nice guitar playing, and that was probably one of the most low effort parts of the whole track. Because she's so excellent.
Dude, the intro and the outro are like two of my favorite parts of that song, because it's just like this island vibe, and it just flows so naturally and organically from them. Like, that was kind of from the start of Eko Zu, and I think that there's still traces of that, but like the live element of it is really important to me. And so even at my shows now, like, I always bring out live vocalists, I'll bring out dancers and performers and stuff, just because even though Eko Zu is basically down to me at this point, there's still such an amazing community of people who love the project and love the music and like love to perform, and they're just badass artists, and I love to showcase that stuff and have it just be part of the whole experience in the show. But basically, when the girls left, I had to figure out whether to keep doing Eko Zu, and I decided early on that I couldn't do it unless I figured out basically a new purpose behind the project, or just uncovered more what was going on. And so obviously I did away with the masks. That lasted like maybe 1 or 2 shows after the girls were gone. And then I was just like, I'm this guy on stage DJing with a lion mask on, like, but it's just me. And it just felt kind of like lonely and weird. And so that didn't last very long after they left. And I'd been listening to a lot of really brilliant podcasts by like Seth Godin, and reading The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, and just seeing how impactful that was on my creative process, and how that was part of the message behind Eko Zu, became the duality between your zoo, which is your animal sense of survivalism, you know, the monkey brain, the lizard brain, that it's your narrative basically in your ego, versus your echo, which is your sense of higher self, your higher calling, and how every day you're making hundreds of decisions and they all kind of come back to like, are you making this decision based on your survival senses, or on pursuing your higher calling, whatever that is. And, you know, it comes right down to the war of art, where it's the resistance. And so the duality is like the confrontation of the resistance. And that's where Eko Zu has kind of transformed into, with like the black and the white. And it's not to say that one is right or wrong or good or bad or anything that's just way simplified. It's just like the duality is just, they're always both going to be there. And it's more about learning how to dance with the fear, confront the fear, and work through the resistance and set yourself up so that when you are making those decisions, you're making them from a good place.
That's so cool. I did not think it had a level of meaning like that. That's really cool, man. And I think, like, you know, when you're in the weeds, stuff like that that you need. You know, you really need to have that light, that purpose at the end of the tunnel. So thank you for sharing that so much. That's really cool. So I want to talk a little bit about you know, what made you make the decision from you know, being behind the scenes more into actually making music like that. The wedding story is incredible, but I remember, like, you know, at one point, you know, it was pretty popping. Like, you were doing front of house for the Chainsmokers, and I was just like, damn, there's my boy on the road with the Chainsmokers all the time. And but I mean, even before COVID, like, you ended up can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, how did that feel when you first got into it, and like, how, you know, what was the arc of that? What made you decide to leave those, you know, great world like that, you know? Because I mean, I think a lot of people would kill for a front of house gig like that, you know. A lot of people would. So yeah, just tell us about that.
The most of the heavy lifting in the track is done by this one drum kit. A lot of people will just continuously ignore drum sound design for, like, you know, huge portions of their career. They'll wonder why their music isn't, like, hitting people right, you know? And it's like, we don't want to hear you play someone else's beat. You know, we want to hear your beat. You know, once you know how to make them, and you understand that it's easy, because it is easy once you do the chorus, then your tracks are going to be so much more expressive, and they're going to have a real authentic texture that is undeniably yours, where you can speak and express yourself through the drums.
I think a lot of people would kill for a front of house gig like that. You know, a lot of people would. So yeah, just tell us about that.
Yeah, it's, I just about like a week ago, I heard the term shadow career in one of the Tim Ferriss podcasts. And basically what it was Stephen Pressfield. And what he was talking about is the shadow career is when you're living out a career that's close to what you want to be doing, but it's not exactly it. And you're basically living out that career out of the fear of not wanting to pursue what you really love doing. And for me, I feel like doing front of house, it was a bit of a shadow career. It was also paying my bills and it was extremely fun, and I was getting to see the world. After the Glitch Mob tour, I toured with Big Wild, who's phenomenal. I did, what's that?
Wild's music, if you're in the audience and you've not heard Big Wild, that stuff just makes my heart soar. It's beautiful.
Unreal. Yeah. And so I got to see him up close. I did the Bass Nectar tour for a little bit over a year. And then straight off of Bass Nectar, I went on to the Chainsmokers, which was a world tour. We did Asia, Australia, Europe. just all over the place, and like arenas. Like we did the Ziggo Dome in Amsterdam. We did Madison Square Garden. We did the O2 Arena in London.
Scenes, and I'm really curious. Are they actually chain smoking all day?
So Drew doesn't smoke.
Oh,
I know.
he's getting one over on us, man.
I just let out their dirty little secret. I hope that they don't, I hope that they don't hate me now. But yeah, but they're so those guys are great, man. Drew and Alex, they're really good dudes, and I had a great time with them out on the road. That was kind of at the height of my front of house touring career, but I was on the road for like 10 months out of the year, but before them. And I basically, my whole music project, even Eko Zu at the time, was basically on the back burner. And so that's why there was only a couple releases in 2018, was because I was, globetrotting. And it was great, but I I feel like that experience was really valuable for me. And also just seeing how things work at such a high level. It's crazy.
Learned from being around these like great world famous artists. Can you share something that you learned that you wouldn't have learned otherwise?
Oh goodness. I mean, it's just been the whole trajectory of touring and hanging out with artists who are at all different stages of their careers. When I did the Big Wild tour, it was a van tour of like 200 to 300 cap rooms. This was in spring of 2018, and he's doing way bigger stuff now. But at the time, it was literally me and Big Wild and our VJ and our merch guy in a 15-passenger van, like driving our ass across the country, throughout Canada. And I was tour managing in front of house. I was doing both for that tour. And so I learned how to like settle shows. What I really learned from that tour is like, you're way better off selling out a 300 cap room than like booking a show for a 600 cap room and selling 450 tickets or something like that. So a lot of times it's better to play a small room and fill it up and make it feel full. You also make more money because then you break the house nut, which basically means if you sell out, then you get like a bonus, versus if you undersell a bigger venue, maybe you can get more people in the door, but A, it doesn't feel as packed. The photos won't look as packed. And B, you might end up losing money because the operational costs are so much more expensive for bigger venues. So yeah, a lot of times if you're playing a smaller room, like it can be better. So that's something that was really helpful to learn. But just seeing artists like, I've done a bunch of tours with or shows with like Slander and Nightmare also, and just seeing everybody at their different stages and seeing the consistencies and the professionalism of all of those different levels. That was probably the most helpful thing. And now I can kind of emulate that because it can be really unclear as a starting artist. You're like, okay, I'm up here and the glitch mob is up here and I want to get up there. But what the fuck happens in all these tiny little steps all the way up and down the ladder? And part of it, you just kind of have to figure it out by doing. But I feel like being able to see how doing a tour of 300 cap venues and how to sell, Big Wild was selling all those shows out and making money from it. And so it's like how you can do that. And then also how the Chainsmokers were touring arenas around the world. There's a lot of consistencies between the two of those that you might not think are there, but it's definitely, there's a strategy, there's a formula to it. There's a code to crack, and it's not as crazy as you might think. I'm still figuring a lot of it out, but it was really helpful to see that. But I guess as far as the turning point for me, so, I was doing these world tours. It was really great. But then you have these events that cause you to stop and just reconsider and figure out just what the fuck that you're doing with your life. And for me, it was on the Chainsmokers Europe tour. I'd been out with them for about 6 months, all around the world. And then one day in Paris, before sound check, I got called into the office by the tour manager.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. And he was basically just like, hey, man, we really love working with you. You've done a great job. This isn't anything personal, you know, because we all love you. But here's a plane ticket. Your bags are in the car, or your bags are in a shuttle. They're taking you back to the airport. Management wants to try somebody new because they want a different sound, basically. And I was kind of stunned, but I think I was pretty gracious in how I took it. You know, there's really only one way that you can.
Sure, which is good.
Yeah, there's really only one way that you can manage that, which is to just say, okay, thank you, you know, appreciate your time, and bye, I guess. Which is crazy. It's like saying goodbye to your family, because you tour with these people and they become your family. And so it's just like, it was kind of like a breakup. It was sort of like your girlfriend being like, hey, yeah, I kind of want to like play the field, so I'm gonna try this other guy out. And calling you an Uber home, so all your shit's in a box. So see ya.
And I think it's like, you know, that kind of, you're always kind of subject to that unless you're the one calling the shots, you know, in the music industry. And it's like, all's fair in the music industry, you know. It's like, it's business, and I can't even tell you how many times I've just had to like swallow my pride and be like, okay, well, that's my ego ground into dust. Thanks for coming out there.
Yeah.
On to the next thing.
100%.
Yeah, like this is super par for the course of the music industry.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially in the pop world, man. Like part of why I really love the bass scene is I just feel like there's this real strong sense of like emotional attachment that people have that in the pop world it's just like a little bit more sort of like, I don't know, man. It's just different. And yeah, that was a really crazy moment for me. I distinctly remember like going back to the hotel to maybe grab something, and like I was just like standing in the elevator going down, and the elevator was all mirrors, and like I saw a bald spot on the back of my head in the mirrors. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm old now. I'm old, and like, you know, my life is over, and like it was just brutal, man. And yeah, got like pretty drunk on the flight back home, and it was just basically trying to figure out what was going on. And I came home to the girls, Astrologic girls, and they were basically, I was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like, I'm gonna try to find, I guess, another tour to go on, because I was already getting offers from other tours that were going out. Like, the Glitch Mob was like, hey, we're going out on another tour. Do you want to come out with us? And I was just like, fuck, well, I love those guys. And when I talked to the girls about it, they were like, when you're on the road, no, you're not making any music. Like, nothing is really happening on the Eko Zu front. And they were like, we really would love if you can figure out a way to not be touring anymore, and so that you can like full-time commit to working on Eko Zu. And I was like, wow, that actually makes a shit ton of sense, because I mean, I've spent the past almost a decade doing sound for other artists and really helping them live out their dreams, but I wasn't making my music, that's the whole point that I went to college. It's just like to make my own music sound better. And then it really turned into a thing of like, well, I have to pay the bills, and so I'm going to make these people's music sound better. And so that was a major turning point for me. And it was one of the toughest decisions I ever had to make, was whether to go on the Glitch Mob tour with the band that I loved, who always treated me extremely well, or to finally focus on my own music. And so I made a promise to myself right then and there that I wasn't going to tour again until it was an Eko Zu tour. Or at least that I was doing like direct support or a support on a tour where I was performing. And I stuck to that for the past 3 years. Yeah, which has been hard. I've taken work doing like just festival one-offs with PK, like where I'll be out for a week, and then I'm back home and working on music. And in the past like 3 years or 2 years since I made that commitment, like I've slowly figured out ways that I've made my music pay my rent. And it hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of luck involved, but it came back to that one decision of me being like, okay, no more touring, no more living out somebody else's dream. I think of the Jim Carrey quote where he says that his father basically failed as, I forget what it was, like, you know, he was selling houses or something. And Jim Carrey looked at his dad and he was like, if my dad can fail at doing something that he's not even passionate about, how could I even consider being okay with failing at something that I didn't love? And so I might as well just try to do what I love. And then if I fail at that, like, then that's fine. But like, how depressing would it be to fail at something that you didn't even want to be doing? What's that?
That's a good point there, Jim.
Yeah, good old Jim. Canada representing. Yeah. I
think there's always all these reasons to like not go to Burning Man and to not spend the weekend in the studio when you could be partying, and to just watch another episode of Netflix and stuff. And it's like, there are so many of these rationalizations that we have for not making art, you know. And I mean, even just like procrastination, it took me a long time to realize how many subtle forms procrastination can take in our lives. And I used to think like, oh, you know, I want everything to be perfect and I'm just gonna like work and work and work until things are perfect. And you know, that had become a form of procrastination. And it's like, I would be in the studio working on music, but still actually procrastinating while I was doing it. And it's just like, it's such a journey to really come to these conclusions where you're like, you know what, enough is enough. I'm going to roll the dice. If I fail, I can handle it, like whatever. And one of the big reasons for me was, I remember I was like in grade 9, I think, and they had a substance abuse resource teacher come in, aka a SART. And he was a phys ed teacher, just like really, really healthy guy, like super, super personable, super buddy. And he was like, oh yeah, man, I used to be an addict. I used to be bad. Let me tell you, I'd hang out down the train tracks. We were doing drugs out of spoons till I realized you can make a little spot like that on your hand. And then I was like, hey, we don't need spoons. We can just snort coke right off our hands. I thought I was so clever. But yeah, man, I realized later when I hit rock bottom that was dumb. I thought it was smart thinking. That was dumb thinking. I turned my life around. I got healthy, and now I'm teaching you here, and I'm happy as a pig in shit. And I was like, wow, if you can like fuck up that bad and still be totally fine, you should take more risks, really. You should really take more risks. That guy took all the risks and lost. He's happy, he's fine, he's got a job he loves, he's in a good mood today. And I was like, yeah, I should take more risks, which was totally not the message I was supposed to get at all.
Right.
But I sometimes think of him. His name was Mr. Sarrazin. And I sometimes remember Mr. Sarrazin and go like, you know what? Roll the fucking dice, Dylan. Roll the fucking dice.
Be great to see where he's at now.
Like wherever he is. He was a really happy person.
Maybe he wasn't entirely, you know, off of the happiness substances.
Knows. But yeah, it's really, yeah, that Jim Carrey one is good. Like, if you can fail doing something you don't love why not fail doing something you love instead? That's a great rationalization.
Exactly.
That's a great rationalization.
Exactly, man.
Oh yeah. So you know, it's been anything but failure lately, though, man. I mean, By a Thread did great. There's a lot of people that really, really dig that track, and it's so awesome to follow it up with the remix EP and also be involved with that. I feel like there's some real momentum now. There's some real buzz. You got a great team and everything. How does that feel after all that frustration and all that second guessing and all that grinding? Like,
Dude, I gotta say, man, after being, you know, the front of house guy and being one of the crew members and just being the supporting team for the artist, you know, the artist, and now having the opportunity to build out my own team and kind of be part of the catalytic force for like making these things happen, like it's really amazing. It's also extremely humbling, and coming from a crew background, I feel like it's really, really important to me that like the people who I'm team members with, like they feel comfortable around me. Like I look at having worked with the Glitch Mob guys, you know, or Big Wild, you know, even the Chainsmokers and like even Lauren Bass Nectar, like always made me feel really comfortable being around them. Like they didn't ever, you know, there was sometimes little ego things here and there, but like overall they made me feel appreciated and like I was part of something. And when you're helping somebody live out their dreams, man, like I've worked with artists, plenty of artists who just made it all about them. And it just like, it felt, I don't know, it just wasn't really very fulfilling in a lot of different ways. And it didn't even really matter what the money was. It's really about just creating a comfortable space for people to feel like they're appreciated and feel like they're contributing to something that's bigger than them. And like, I feel that Eko Zu is even way bigger than me. I feel that Eko Zu is like a collective and it's a community that's growing. And I just wanted to be a beacon for people to be able to meet other people who are like on that same frequency. Like my manager Matt is a great example of just like we're on the exact same wavelength. Like I kind of knew it really early on, and so I love connecting him to Mother Wolf because Mother Wolf is on that same wavelength. And so now
working with them, they're so cool. They're sending me a Mother Wolf jacket, like just to be nice. How cool is that? Like I will wear the shit out of that jacket.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's the way that you build a community, especially they're doing it from the ground up, like the ground up. You know, it's like they didn't start the label based on a super famous artist, which is kind of the formula these days. It's like they did it just based on having dope people, you know, and a really great founder, Tom, it's basically his whole baby, but then he's got a whole team, and it's mostly women who are running Mother Wolf too, which is also amazing because it's just like we need more women in music.
Amen to that.
Yeah, dude, it's way too much of a boys club, and it's like it's bad. It's detrimental to the whole like community and the whole just scene in general. It's like there's a lot of toxic masculinity that comes with that, and the only way to remedy that is to just get more women involved and to make it more like of a place where it's comfortable for women to be involved. Because like, you know, I can't tell you how many conversations that I've you know, been around on tour that were just like they wouldn't have happened if there was some female energy around, and like it would have been a better conversation for it. So yeah, it's just great, man. It's really awesome to see this collective. It's kind of like what you're doing with the dojo of just like connecting amazing people, you know, like Sean Spiderhound and like all these just great folks that I've met through the dojo and like at your parties, at your birthday and stuff. And it's like, it's the best feeling, man. Just like bringing together people who you know are going to resonate and like build dope shit that also like puts positive ripple effects out into the world and into music in general.
People that you actually like you want to do good work for them too, you know, like not just for you, but like, and not just for the work, but like when you're working with people that you like, it's like because you like them, you work harder and you work better, you know? And it's just like, you know, I will when I'm figuring out like who's gonna do what job, you know, I will take someone who's cool to be around and willing to make it their primary focus and learn what they don't know over some blasé expert who like couldn't give a shit and thinks they're amazing, you know,
Exactly.
any day of the week.
Yeah, any day, man.
Let's talk a little bit about the remix EP that came out today. Like a Feather is an epic song. Like, let's start with the original. Like a Feather is like a crazy song. It's got such a vibe. Like the chords are great, the drop is great, the production's great, the vocals are great. But how did it start? Like, that was your first time working with Kraddy, right?
Motherfucking Kraddy, bro. Dude, legend. I mean, back in you know, when I was in college, like Android porn, and like
It's such a masterpiece, that tune.
dude, like that transforms the way that I listen to music and like what I wanted to make as far as music. You know, it just like it completely flipped my perspective on what music could be. And yeah, I mean, Like a Feather, man, if people heard what that tune started as and the original that Kill Will and I were working on right after Dose of the Dark Side had come out, and we even played it out at a couple shows, but like it was just a completely different tune, and it kind of was like had one foot in the grave because like we just never finished it. We'd put like tons of sessions into it and it just kept changing, but it was never like actually getting finished. And maybe after like 2 months of it sitting on the shelf, I was just like, okay, there's an amazing top line in here. So I grabbed the vocal, stripped everything else. I think I deleted everything else, and I just started it again from the piano, and just sat down with the piano and like just kind of restructured the whole song around this top line and basically remixed it. And so I figured out all the chords. I rejiggered the chords a little bit. I wrote like the piano intro and stuff that it starts with, and basically made a fully arranged tune, but with no drums and no bass, and no drops. And so it was basically just the fully arranged tune, but 16 bars holes for the drops. And I was like, kind of tried some drop ideas, but I was also kind of stumped. And I was like, you know, maybe I could send this to somebody to just do the drop section. And I'd been chatting with Kraddy a little bit via Instagram. I knew him through like Lightning in a Bottle and just that sort of scene. And I was like, hey man, what do you think about this demo? Like, would you want to do a drop for it and do the drums? And then like, you know, maybe I'll mix it down and then we'll call it a day. And so I sent, he took a listen. He's like, yeah, this is cool. Like, I'll see what I can do. And then like a couple weeks later, he sent me back like a super rough demo. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, I wish I had a reaction video for like the way that I reacted when I first heard that drop. I was just like, no fucking way. Like, that's fucking Kraddy. Like, drop on that shit. And it was ridiculous, man.
The drums and like the kind of stop and go of the riffs.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like classic Kraddy.
Yeah, and like the breaths in there, like how the breaths are an instrument. He just like took a snippet of a breath and like made it rhythmic. It's almost like a shaker.
Love it.
It's phenomenal. And so he basically added the drums and the drops and then sent me back stems. And then I spent some time just like deep diving on the mix, like doing a lot of the techniques that you had showed me, a lot of the stuff that I'd learned from Seth Drake. I think I was, yeah, Seth is a legend. He mastered Like a Feather. Just did a phenomenal over the top job. And yeah, I think that was like the first track that I was really pushing over 0, which is really helpful for any producers out there. Like, push your tracks in Ableton 7 or 8 dB over 0, like so that your master bus is just clipping like a motherfucker. You know, when you finally print your final, obviously you'll get that under 0, but like just to figure out what is actually happening in your mix, you learn so much by pushing over 0.
Because there are sounds that will distort during mastering that you don't know if they're going to distort until you run them through some clipping. And then the clipping that occurs on the master bus will show you, like, if it sounds clean clipped, it'll sound great mastered. But if it sounds dirty clipped, it's not just because of clipping, it's because of clipping and your mix.
Yeah. And kind of what I've been learning is if you can get your song to sound as loud as a mastered tune, like take your best, loudest reference tracks and throw them into your session. Make sure that they're not hitting your master, any of your master processing, but like make your song as loud as theirs when you're over 0 and they have a mastered tune with like nothing on your master bus. And now you're going to have a clean, loud master that's going to be as loud as like a Skrillex song or something. I'm pretty sure that Skrillex and those guys have been doing this for years and years of just like, it's just a really helpful way of figuring out, you know, how hard your mastering guy is going to be able to hit his limiter or whatever is going to depend on how good your mix was. And it's like quality control, as Seth puts it. So yeah, I mean, I highly recommend anybody check out like, you know, the Producer Dojo, the weekly download, like Seth's videos. They're the best resources on the internet as far as I'm concerned. Like I feel way more from this stuff than I did from all my years in schooling. And it's kind of funny, when I first started working with you and like Seth, my brain was kind of fried at first because it went against everything that schools had ever taught me about, like, you got to work at -18 and like, you know, don't use too much compression and like it's just all this crazy shit. And then these guys come in and they're like, yeah, you got to clip the shit out of your master bus. And I was just like, what? That doesn't make any sense. I paid $100 grand to go to school for them to tell me not to do that. And now you guys are telling me to do the opposite. And it
in a row. You know, it's like, it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, I think like, you know, in a lot of ways, thinking that you know something is often the enemy of real understanding. And I have this problem, like when I teach people, especially really intelligent people, like a lot of the time people will come across the country to study with me, and they'll, like, you know, pay thousands of dollars and flown across the country, and they'll be asking me to explain something, and I'll get halfway through the explanation and they'll just jump in to finish my sentence, and it'll be something that's just completely fucking wrong. Like, not what I was saying, you know? And it's like, if you're a really intelligent person and you're used to being in, I guess, a classroom where you know what like 7 times 9 is really quick, like you jump in and you got the right. But in music, it's like, it's a subjective domain. There's a million ways to do absolutely everything. And like, I'm still learning new things about how scales work. I'm still learning new things about how EQ works. I'm still learning new things about MIDI. Like, you know, I'm like, there's so many things that you like, you know, it's like there's this Buddhist saying, at first mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers, but then mountains are not mountains and rivers are not rivers, until finally mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. Exactly. And it's really like, you know, there's this reductive quality to naming where, you know, like, I mean, even just the grid, like learning about offset, like not swing, but offset, and the importance that that makes on a grid. It's like, I wasn't hearing it because I would listen to a beat and I would be thinking in terms of the 16 pad grid or the 16 step grid. And I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, that pattern's like boom, boom, bap, chicka, chicka, boom, bap. There's nothing else going on there. And then you actually get one of those things up in a sequencer and you see it, like how things don't line up, and more importantly, why they don't line up. And you're like, fuck, there's a completely like there's an infinity of possibilities between any two of those steps in that 16 pad grid, and I couldn't hear it before, you know. But yeah, as like one more Chinese saying about this is the 5 colors blind the eye, the 5 notes deafen the ear. And that's because in Chinese color theory, there are 5 colors in the color system, and in Chinese music, they use the pentatonic scale. And if you think that there are only the 5 notes in the scale and no notes in between, you've lost the plot. But yeah, learning totally backwards, counterintuitive, opposite ways to use the exact same tools is like, that is the name of the game, and that's why you can never be too good at the fundamentals, you know. And a guy like Seth is great at teaching that, and that's definitely something that I really work hard to teach in the dojo. Is like, you know, it's not all about that fancy plugin that came out last week with the cool ad on Instagram. You know, it's really EQ and compression and recording technique. That's what makes a good mix. Have you heard why loudness comes from empty space? In my Composing the Mix workshop, I will teach you how to take away from your mix to give a bigger sound and a deeper impact.
The stock Ableton shit is amazing, man. Like I've just learned new things about using the Wave Shaper and Ableton Saturator, and how like I'm using it now to add like an audio reactive white noise, like swishiness to the tops of my crash cymbals and my hi-hats and my snares. It's like you can use it like erosion almost, but it's just so like sculptable. And dude, yeah, it's just like between the Ableton stock stuff, and I would say like maybe some of the iZotope stuff and some of the Fab Filter stuff, that's kind of all that you need, you know? And so I'm actively trying to avoid getting any new plugins basically anymore. It's like 9 times out of 10, you don't need new plugins. You just need to get better with the ones that you already have. And
you know, it's so easy to get caught up in synths. And as though Ableton itself is not a synth. You know? And if you properly understand, any DAW is a modular synthesizer. You can configure modules, you can route them any way you like, and you know, there's so much power in that. Like even just like using extremely resonant peaked EQs for synthesis, you know, like you can take a burst of white noise and turn it into a sine wave, you know, turn it into a bongo, turn it into whatever the hell you want. You know, anything can become anything else with enough EQ and compression.
Yeah.
It's really just about getting the frequencies and volumes. Like that's it. That's what sound is. It's frequency and volume, you know? And if you can get the frequency and volume that you're after by isolating things and putting them into shape, then off you go. Right. You know, off you go. And like EQ and compressor can be used for synthesis.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And then Span Plus, Span Plus. It's like, it's the other secret weapon that I think more and more people are getting turned on to. But I love using Span for like analyzing harmonics and stuff. You know, it's one of my friends asked me about how I got the sub to sound the way that it did in Like a Feather. And like a sub, it's like if you can just get the fundamental and then get your partials right, which is usually like it's 19 semitones up. It's like a perfect fifth and then an octave. It's like when I analyzed the Glitch Mob subs, because I had all their stems for all their live shows, and so I had their subs separate. What's that?
Stems from Ed, you lucky bastard.
Oh, I know. It's ridiculous, man. And their subs were, it was literally just like the fundamental. It was like, you know, an E, 40 hertz, and then it was an octave up, and then a perfect fifth from that, which would be the B. So it was like, that's what a good sub sounds like, basically. And like on Span, you could make that an operator and have like the fattest sounding sub. And so it's really helpful to just be able to see that stuff on the visualizer of like Span, which is a free plugin. Yeah. Span Plus, so good. What was that?
Videos? Is there an accented YouTube video?
I think I heard you call it Spawnplush one day, or maybe I just started it.
Watching some tutorial where this guy was like Vashengo. I think he was like from Brazil or something. I thought that was pretty good because of the X.
Yeah.
Vashengo.
I think
Maybe it is Vashengo. I don't know. I think they're German. Aren't all audio companies German? They pretty much are.
Yeah. I think I heard you refer to ableton push or something.
Henke. Robert Henke. He says parameters, which I cannot get over parameters. Yeah, well, I love Robert Henke. I have a secret crush on him. He's just I went out for beer with him one time, and he was just so cool and so nice and so generous with his knowledge. And then he has this like really kind of shy, self-effacing manner about him, and it's just I'm just in love with that man. I think he's so great. I think he's so great. But yeah, so yeah, Ableton Push. he's and parameters. Oh yeah, he's great. He's great. Yeah, no, I mean the whole Ableton family, man. They're all so. It's just that company is really like they're doing all the right things, man. Oh, yeah. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan.
Hell yeah, same. Clearly, obviously.
Tattoo. That definitely says a lot. Yeah. So okay. So Kraddy hands you back his sketch. You're super excited. You finish it up together, and then like, how did the remix EP start? Like, because you curated a hell of a list of remixers there. How did that come together?
Okay. So this is based on some really, really great advice that the Funk Hunters gave me at Lightning in a Bottle, probably 2017 or something like that. And I love those guys, man. Nick and Donks, they're just like, dude, fantabulous, fantastic people. And I was just like, yo, so, you know, what are some things that you guys wish that you had done earlier in your career that like maybe you figured out is a great move now? And they basically, Nick said, I wish that we had, like, rather than spending a bunch of money on PR or like music videos, they're like, I wish that we had brought on other bigger artists to remix our stuff. And I was like, that's brilliant. Why didn't I ever think of that? And then fast forward to a couple years later, basically Mother Wolf was like, yeah, we love this tune that you did with you and Kraddy and Killwell. Like, we'd like to shoot a music video for it. And I was like, okay, like that's a good idea, but how about instead of shooting a music video, we take, you know, whatever this budget is that we have, and we figure out a way that we can bring on a couple different artists to remix this tune. And in hindsight, I mean, just kind of looking at how much momentum that came from this, it was such a better investment to put the money into bringing on other artists rather than spending it on a music video that people may or may not have watched. And it's just like the amount of buzz and like marketing collaboration. it's crazy. It's just like,
it was wild.
Yeah. And so I highly recommend, and it kind of gives me some hope because I feel like I'm just starting to sort of figure out how to make money from my music, but I'm like, what is the next step between like me, you know, being able to fully support myself from like touring and stuff, and like what is the sort of middle ground? What's that?
Man, I'm dying to play a show.
I know it.
I'm dying.
My God. Yeah. And so I feel like there's actually like a very attainable middle ground of like, as artists are climbing up, it's like, you know, if you want to collaborate with an artist that's bigger than you, like understand that they might not have any stripes to gain from doing a tune with you, you know, especially unless you bring like a super fucking solid demo, kind of like I did with Kraddy, of like, Will and I had a sick fucking song. All it needed was a dope drop. Kraddy was like, he was into it at that point. Whereas like, if I was just like, yo, Kraddy, let's collab, bro, he would have been like, okay. You know, or he would have just been like, I gotta go, you know? And so, And so I feel like it makes a lot of sense, man. Like if you're like, hey, I really want to collab with this producer who's like at a little bit of a higher level than me, like how can I make this worth their time aside from like just, working on a tune together or even just having a cool song. It's like, if you can also make it worth a priority for them so that they can either remix it or like do a collab or something, like that's a really great way to like keep the scene like really sort of self-sufficient and self-supportive. So yeah, man, that was some of the best advice that I ever got. And, now I really want to like, eventually figure out a way to line up a collab with like Opiuo or it just kind of opens so many doors of like, yeah.
Sick, man. Like his sound design and mixing on that is just like out of control. And it's just like he makes really likable music too. Like, it's like an enjoyable experience listening to it,
I love how the Opiuo remix and all of his music, it's just like there's a drop and then there's a more drop and then there's a more drop and then there's a more drop and then there's like a post drop and then and then there's a break and then it all goes down again. It's like it's so amazing how he just gets drop and it just keeps going and like that's the festival vibes. It's like that's when the totems are up in the air and like people are just losing their shit, and then you give them a breathing room, but it's like I love how it keeps the party going, man. It's really amazing.
There too, like it's just also intelligent, the sequencing. Yeah, I really like it. The one that I think is has been really sounding good on my stereo is that Dimond Saints remix. Like, and the way it's got this kind of like, vintage kind of analog, like wobbly phaser kind of thing happening and stuff. It almost feels like a psychedelic rock vibe. Like it's really cool, man. I dig that remix a lot. Yeah, really, really great.
Phenomenal.
Champagne Drip's vocal treatment I thought was pretty cool too.
Yeah,
it's good to see some curveballs
there.
He
did like the octave up kind of vibe. Probably like pitch wheel or manipulator or maybe little altar boy or something. I love pitch wheel, man. You turned me on to pitch wheel for doing any of the octaving stuff because it's got like the inertia knob.
That Bachelors of Science drum and bass remix is pretty hot too, and that got premiered on BBC, right?
Yes, BBC Radio 1. Hey.
That's like big time.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah, Ride the Wave, the other collab that me and Bachelors did, also got on BBC Radio 1, Rene Levis. Same thing. He's fucking phenomenal, man. Like for reference tracks for drum and bass, I'm gonna do more D&B tunes, I think, because it's just like so fun. Yeah, man, I love your tune, man. Like the way that you use modular synths or just kind of how you get that sort of top end sheen without it being like harsh or anything like that. It's like it just feels very silky and like, but then you got your subs that are just like knocking, and it's a great like balance of organic feeling, but then like also high production value.
That I found that helped me out with that remix, and to get that like to get that sound where it like the sounds kind of feel loud without being so loud that they offset the mix, is this new trick that I've been doing where basically you take a sound that's in the highs that has no sub, which is almost all of the sounds, and then you put a very deep sub underneath it and run them through saturator or clipping together so that the sub is intermodulating with the high sound, and then you high pass out the sub. So you never hear the sub, and all the sub does is push it through the distortion. So it's like varying the amplitude into the clipper, because that becomes almost like a synthesis parameter, because the clipper is responding to the amplitude. And I do this all the time. Like I'll do it to hi-hats, I'll do it to like synth leads or whatever, where you never hear the sub, so you'd never know that that's how it's done, but it like modulates the distortion, and then you get this like really juicy organic sounding distortion out of it.
Are you doing that on like on a send or something?
bleed with yeah, just like a parallel processing with the lead. So the synth lead, yeah, like one of the best dubstep patches for the scream bass kind of patch is where you take two sine waves 4 octaves apart and run them through clipping together, and then the bottom sine wave is crushing the top wave, and then you high pass it out. So I'd been making that patch for a bit, and then I was like, oh well, what if I took that technique and then applied it to other sounds, you know? And it's just a fantastic distortion technique, you know, to have this this sub, because it's also too the amplitude modulation essentially that the sub is providing as it goes into the clipping is in tune with your song. So you can take an atonal sound like a hi-hat, and then suddenly it's got like, you know, key synced amplitude modulation distortion happening.
Yeah, I like what you do with the. You showed me a trick where it's basically, I think you called it a bin shaker or something, where it's like white noise on top of a sub that's like modulated to the frequency. So it's like actually the white noise is like resonating at the frequency that the sub is hitting.
So you get like a rattlesnake kind of bass. Yeah, I make that bass sound all the time. I learned that from Culprit, from the Culprit masterclass, which is totally awesome, and you should definitely watch it. Yeah, it's a great technique, and like that whole, you know, that whole like halftime neuro sound is all about those noise bases.
It's just a nice sound, man.
And you get so much like definition on the sub. It'll be like, you know, like you'll be able to hear the pattern of the notes and stuff a lot more clearly when you maybe can't hear the sub. But yeah, super cool, super cool. So C.H.A.Y's remix is really good too. The techno vibes, I think that one really rounds the package out. And C.H.A.Y's actually a very talented mastering engineer too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so that's why it sounds so nice. Yeah.
That was cool. I didn't even know that he was remixing the tune until it was basically done.
He did a great job. I love how you know, just how diverse group of remix it is. I think it's really what we needed to get critical mass on this one.
Exactly. Yeah, it's crushing right now, man. It's like, and everybody, you know, all the artists and everyone have just been like really just down for it. And, you know, it can be tough sometimes getting a big group of people to work together and like without butting heads, or like some people just check out, and there was nothing like that. It was a really good combination of, but I think it's also because everybody involved with this project just fucking loves music. And so as long as that is what is kind of paving the way, and then everybody just has chill vibes aside from that, and like, you know, is generally responsible and driven and on top of shit, that's the formula, you know.
Let's change gears a little bit and talk about music production. So you know, you've definitely been putting in the hours. What kind of breakthroughs have you had that you wish you could go back and tell yourself in the past about?
Holy shit, dude. The bus mastering stuff is just like like that is the single most major reason that, like, I mean, if you listen to the early Eko Zu stuff, I'm sure it's the same for any artist. Like, I remember that Porter Robinson like basically disowned everything that he'd put out you know, prior to whatever his most recent music was. And it's like, if you listen to the early Eko Zu stuff, it's just like, it's not as big of a sound as like Dose of the Dark Side and what came after. And a lot of it is like exactly what you had showed me of, like, basically all tracks, you know, there's some flexibility here, but all of your tracks basically exist in like their respective groups. And like, you'll have a drums group and a bass top group, and then a group for your sub that is only like 130 hertz and down, and then a group for your synths, and then a group for your lead vocal, and then a group for your BGVs, and then a group for transitions. And like, that is like literally all the elements that make up an electronic tune. And so I've just kind of compartmentalizing all of those and doing a little bit of saturation on the end with like the drum bus, and then the leveling is crucial, because then instead of like slamming everything into a limiter on your master bus, you're kind of compressing all the different elements and like soft clipping them before they even hit the master. And so you don't get these crazy out of control peaks. Everything is like really controlled and tight. And you have your sub on like its own separate fader or whatever, to where it's like, you're like, oh, my sub is overloading my session. Like, I'll just turn it down rather than like trying to do a low shelf on your bass, you know. And then all of your groups, you can also do a high pass filter, like around 130 hertz, except for your sub and your kick. And then your low end is just clean as fuck because it's not competing with anything else down there. And so. And the leveling that you do, where it's like your drums are at 0, all of your other groups are pins to -6. And so it's like your other groups will never exceed -6. Your drums will never exceed 0. I've sort of like, the way that I've been doing it lately is like, I'll have my kick and my snare will be their own group. So my kick is at 0, my snare is at 0, my drums are at 0 or -1, and then everything else is -6. And so my master is just like fucking 8 dB over 0 usually. And so sometimes I'll mix like that, or just throw a utility on the master, turn it down 2 or 3 dB if it's like too much. But usually I can be mixing pretty comfortably over 0, and it's kind of fun because it's just like, it feels like you're not only like you're driving a spaceship or something, but also it shows you really clearly what elements of your mix need to be there in order for the song to sound whole, and what shit can just usually go. Because like, as producers, we're always like, I need more things. Like, the song is not interesting enough. I need to add a synth and add a this and add a that. Where it's like, when you're way over 0, you're like, oh my God, there's so much distortion. But if I just mute this part, there's no more distortion. And like, I kind of didn't need that part anyways. And so you're less tempted to be adding shit later, because you're like, oh, well, I'm already loud as fuck and the mix sounds great. So I'm just starting projects now, like where I'm basically already in the red, and then I don't really need to do as much to them. You know, so that stuff just alone has revolutionized. And it took me a couple months to even sort of wrap my head around it, and to just like trial and error and getting the side chaining dialed in.
MIDI or audio, or how are you doing your side chaining these days?
So dude, Bentley from Pixel Terror turned me on to Shaperbox, and previously I was using LFO Tool, and LFO Tool gets a little weird with CPU, whereas Shaperbox, all of my groups have a kick and a snare Shaperbox sidechain compression. So I have probably 14 instances of Shaperbox, and like, it's fucking rock solid. And I just use a MIDI note from my kick and my snare, and that's just hitting everything. And like, usually I'll be at like 80% of like compression, and like maybe a 16th note. And what I like about Shaperbox is you can draw in a nice smooth, like, it's almost like an S curve. And man, it's so crazy, like the level of control that you can have and how clean, because that's part of mixing over 0 is like, your sidechain compression has to be fucking dialed, because like when that kick hits
The exact opposite shapes, like exact, you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like, you know, when people say sidechain compression, right? Like, compression is the problem, because a compression is a reactive process.
Mm-hmm.
So even if the attack is at like 2 milliseconds or something, there's still 2 milliseconds of full volume on top of your transient, and that's not what you want, you know? Like I find MIDI, you know, MIDI based enveloping is really, you know, it's definitely the way.
Mm-hmm.
Way.
Yeah, it's the future. Yeah, man. Is there anything like in, like, let's just say throughout quarantine, are there any like sort of new techniques that you've discovered that have been really helpful?
I mean, there's been a bunch, but one thing that I have really gotten into is I finally have a computer that is fast enough and stable when it runs Contact, that I can get into Contact. Because before, I would always just load up a Contact patch, you know, play a melody, sample it, and get rid of it, you know, because it was unstable.
Mhm.
Whereas now, you know, I have this computer that can run it wonderfully. So I've been setting up a, you know, multi-computer setup using VE Pro, which is a software made by Vienna. We all know the Vienna Symphonic Collection, you know, famously used by the likes of Tipper and stuff to get all those like lush sounding strings. But Vienna has this other software called VE Pro, and VE stands for Vienna Ensemble. And the idea is to build an ensemble of different computers. So using the VE Pro protocol, if you have a hardline Ethernet connection, you can exchange audio and MIDI with almost no latency over Ethernet.
Nice.
Now I've done that, and I've got this laptop over here has become an instrument server, and I've managed to get Contact running stably on that laptop as well. So now I'm basically using my main computer for tracking and production. And then I've been sequencing up here on the Circlon, which allows you to do all this like crazy, like there's these sequences called P3 sequences where you have control over note, velocity, length, and offset per step. But then you also have up to 4 of these configurable actions that you can program. So, you know, and you can assign probabilities to them, and you can make the tracks interact. So like, let's say you have a chord progression, your melody might have, you know, 2 notes, arrest, 2 notes, arrest, 2 notes, and then a 50% chance of stealing 1 note from the chord progression at random.
Nice.
You know, and stuff like that. Or you could be like, okay, 25% of the time, change directions. You know,
Right.
all this stuff on the sequences, and you have up to 4 layers of these aux events. So it could be sending MIDI CC data per step. You know, maybe you want to do a filter automation pattern, or it could be adjusting the quantized percentage per step. And then you have like you know, MIDI that you played in, and you're modulating it going in and out. Or you could change the time base, so you're quantizing it to 16ths, and then you're like, let's quantize everything to quarters for a bar, and then we'll go back. You know, and all this. And you can modulate all of that. It's so sick. So now I've got this guy controlling instruments there and here, and you know, my other synths, and then the you know, my main computer is like tracking it all. So I started going through and making multi-sampled instruments of all of my analog synths, and having like, you know, a polyphonic version of the SEO2 with those amazing oscillators is insane. Having a polyphonic version of the SH101 that I use for like all my shit. So I've been really getting into it, and I realized that, you know, all the commercial sampler libraries that you get, they're all like really, really perfect, and they're trying to not sound like a sampler. They're trying to be basically like fake real instruments. But if you let go of the idea of trying to sound like a real instrument and just kind of like embrace the kind of like flaws and quirks of the process, you can get these really fucking wild sounds that you can't get any other way. Here, I'll show you one of them for a second. So
Yeah.
so I was making these multi-samples from my Moog 1. And let's see, let's get those out here. So it's making multi-samples of my Moog 1, and I was sampling an arpeggiator patch, right? And, you know, at first I was like, oh, geez, you know, do I want to, you know, like this arpeggiator patch, I'm going to have to use it as a specific BPM or whatever. And I was a little bit like, let's see, where is it? Yeah, I was a little bit like, I was like, how useful is it to sample an arpeggiator patch? And then I realized that, you know, like, because I was sampling 1 note for every 3 notes on the keyboard and pitching them around. And then I started playing with the loops and playing with the timing of the loops and making sure that all of the loops are a slightly different length. And it starts doing this crazy Steve Reich shit where you could hear the phases of all the arpeggiators going in and out of each other. So rather than pretending that I'm playing like a synth with a timeline synced arpeggiator, you get something that sounds like this. Another ARP patch.
Nice.
Yeah, but yeah, hearing it all. Of the same arpeggiator at slightly different rhythms, kind of like coming in and out of each other in an organic way.
Nice.
Just sounds like. Everything's still like slowly drifting and shit, and like you would never make that patch on the Moog 1 because the arpeggiator would have one global clock, right? But yeah, so I've been making all these patches where the loops on each note are like slightly out of sync with the other notes and kind of like embracing the imperfection of it all, and you're able to make these like wild sounds that you couldn't make any other way. And then I also found out that Kontakt has a very easy to use script editor with a unison script that you can apply to any sample, and you can have up to 8 voices of unison on any sample, and then you can modulate their stereo position with an LFO, and you can modulate their detune. And when you have like 8 copies of a thing with like modulating detuning in stereo, it's fucking insane. And you can just do that to any sample. It's like the first script on the list, basically.
Whoa.
Yeah. So yeah, Kontakt, very cool.
Ah, I didn't know that about Kontakt.
Yeah, and you can edit the scripts as text inside of Kontakt. Like all of the scripts that are running, it's like declare knob value, declare parameter destination, and then you could like, you know, change the curve on the response or, you know, whatever. Like you could, and when you type in declare knob, blah, 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 boop, up pops the knob on the user interface, and you can have it control something else. So there's all these like hidden parameters that you can just like make knobs for by typing into the scripts. It's so cool.
It's crazy how coding is like starting to intersect with music production a little bit, like with stuff like Max, you know, where you're coding, or even with OBS. I basically learned how to map this guy to OBS.
MIDI Fighter Crew.
Yeah, bro. So, but in order to do that, I had to like code it so that my MIDI fighter would send keystrokes like from my computer keyboard into OBS.
Way back in the day. Did you use Bohms or what did you use?
I think it was MIDI pipe.
I tried that one.
It's sick, dude. I mean, it took me a little bit to figure out, but it's great. So now I'm like triggering all my video overlays in OBS during my live stream DJ sets using my MIDI controller. And it's like, I have like GIF overlays that are being like image masked and like color keyed and like all this crazy shit. But yeah, it's just wild as a music person, how many more like hats that you have to wear in order to make like compelling anything, any content. Yeah.
See, that's one thing that I've learned over the years in the music industry is that my resistance to wearing all of the hats was really what was holding me back. And, you know, when I was forced to manage myself because no one else was going to come along and fucking sprinkle their magic fairy in a suit dust on my career, when I was forced to learn to manage myself, I learned how to oversee a manager properly and how to make sure that I know what my manager is doing. I mean, when I was forced to do all my own graphic design by, you know, just budgetary constraints at the beginning of the dojo, like I had, a million different products that I needed design for. I did that all myself. And then now, you know, I know how to oversee graphic designers and I don't wear that hat anymore. You know, I used to have all of my Facebook advertising handled by an ads team until I caught like heinous fucking spelling errors and stuff, or just like they would just explain something wrong about production because they didn't know what they were talking about because they weren't music producers. producers, and then that would be an ad that I was paying to run. So now I do like all my own advertising, and wearing the ad hat has just like, since I started actually getting into not just managing like the Facebook ads, but managing the creation of the ads. It has been so much better, and I just feel like, you know, my brand is like so important, you know, and the ads, like a lot of the time that's people's first exposure to your brand, and if you're just like trusting that to someone else because you don't want to deal with it, that's a mental block, you know. So over the years, I've had to learn to wear all of the hats, and you know, you might not wear them forever, but you should at least understand what it feels like and how it works if you're going to be able to, you know, to have meaningful and useful conversations with all the members on your team. You got to know how their job works.
I just finished reading the biography of Leonardo da Vinci. Bios by Walter Isaacson wrote it, and he's a phenomenal writer, but the best takeaway that I got from Leonardo's life is like, number one, he was a bit of a jack of all trades. Like, the reason that he was such a good artist is because he would also dissect people and horses. Like, this was way before that was even remotely acceptable.
Like, you had to know a guy.
Yeah. And well, because he was one of the first to make like proper anatomy drawings of like the heart and stuff, because there was no photographers or no cameras, and so that shit would be decomposing within like an hour. And so if the artist wasn't also the surgeon who was like operating on these cadavers before their bodies decomposed, like there was really no accurate drawings up until that point. And so it was because he was so interested in all that stuff. And he also he designed props for plays. Like, that was actually the first helicopter design. It was for a play, for like a device that would like levitate into the air. He designed like was that
good reviews?
Yeah. He designs like riverways for cities. He was designing actually like massively complex cities and like how to get, you know, the plumbing and everything like that. He was designing war machines. So he was an engineer. He was basically an engineer artist who never finished any of his works. Like, the Mona Lisa is unfinished. Aside from like Vitruvian Man and like 2 or 3 other pieces, he never released anything in his life. He was just like constantly obsessed with trying to perfect it. So Leonardo was one of the biggest procrastinators of artists of all time, and he was also like massively jack of all trades, and yet he's regarded today as one of the best artists of all time.
Not to do. Don't be a perfectionist, don't procrastinate, and don't try and be a jack of all trades. And he did all of those, and now look.
Right. I mean, well, there's this hyper specialty, like there's this perception that we all need to hyper specialize in whatever we're going to be in order to be successful. But he was one of the first to prove that there's massive benefits to wearing multiple hats and to find the synergy between all those different disciplines to become the best at whatever that you are.
When you're working in an artistic domain too, because of the subjectivity of what you're doing, there are like so many things that you can learn from completely unrelated fields. Like, you know, like when I'm explaining things to people, I will often refer to either the sports analogies or cooking analogies, and
okay.
those two things I used to teach music all the time. And if I didn't know about cooking, especially, yeah, it's essential. You know, you gotta, and I mean, it's all just like music has this wonderful ability to reflect anything that you want to put into it, you know, and it can be whatever you want in your life. Like, music could be this totally utilitarian thing, like you know, designing different beeps for a fridge, or it could be, you know, something that is like a personal therapy, or, you know, to help you process some trauma or other emotional experience, or it could be, you know, just a recreational activity, or you could do it competitively, or you could, you know, and it's just like that subjectivity and that responsiveness of it. It just makes it like you know, I mean, every week I fall in love with music again, you know, in a different way. Like there's it's such an open and a field and such a bottomless well. I'm just so happy that I get to do this with my life and that I get to share this joy with other people. Because I mean, the social filter, you know, you kind of touched on that before, but the social filter that music provides, you know, that really helped me, man. Like I was in a pretty dark place in my life before music was like a major force in my life, you know, and you know, when you meet people through music, like those are your people, you know. Like it really makes such a great difference. And I think that like, you know, when you approach music as medicine and when you approach it as something that fills a need, you know, and you're not like, what can my pursuit of music do for me, but like what can my music do for other people.
Yeah.
You know, I think that switch, you know, the sooner you can flip that switch and the sooner you can start thinking of your music as like, hey, this is a dose of medicine that someone needs, and I'm going to make it as strong and pure as I can so that they can have that effect, you know. As soon as you start approaching music like that, you just get so much more traction when you know you're scratching someone's itch than when you're just like, hey, look what I can do, you know. It's just a different level to it, I find.
Yeah, I mean, the most valuable lesson, one of the most valuable lessons that I've learned is like, when you're promoting your music, it's not about you. Like, how is it about the other person? Like, how is it about the other person on the other end? Because if you're just like, yo, look at my shit, I'm so dope, it's like people are like, scroll. But if you're like, yo, this is about you, this is why it's cool for you, like this is why you're gonna like it, it's like that's when people will pay attention. You know, it's just it's human nature, but it's also like, I don't know. It's very one-dimensional when you just are watching or listening to somebody and like they only care about themselves. You know, it's pretty unattractive. And so if you can figure out a way to make your music about other people and for other people, it needs to be for you, but it also, like, if you want people to be able to latch onto it, it's like, how can people identify with this? Like, what is the latching point for it to be about them, not just about you?
Well, yeah. Well, I think that's a great sentiment for us to leave people on. I give them some food for thought. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to our viewers and listeners before we part ways?
I guess just one more thing that this conversation sort of brings to mind that has really resonated with me a lot lately is like, there's two ways to live out your life and your career and your just the way that you interact with people. And I heard this on, I forget what podcast, but basically that you can live your life either transactionally or based on building relationships. And so I think that this ties back to what you were just saying of like, you find your tribe through music. And, you know, I live in LA. And so I sort of see this a lot, but within the first couple minutes of talking to somebody, you catch on pretty quickly to like, you know, are they trying to build a relationship with you, or are they here for a transaction? If the conversation is like, what can you do for me, you know, so that I can return, you know, what can I do for you? It's like, that's a very different conversation than somebody who you're just like, yo, we're vibing, you know, like, let's just kind of just build this and like see what happens without having any expectations out of it. And, you know, I think that the seeing things through making decisions based on transactionally versus based on building relationships, like, it's just a philosophy that is really helpful to internalize and just be aware of, because we all do it sometimes. And yeah, I mean, hopefully all this stuff is helpful for people in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, dude, just thank you so much for just taking the time. It was really great to catch up, you know?
COVID. But, you know, I really feel, you know, super connected, especially through the music and these last two releases together, man. It's been really dope, and they've been really kind of, they got legs. So, it's been great to catch up, man. And thanks a lot for your time and your awesome music, and for being a part of the dojo. Where can people find you online?
Just hit me up. I'm on all the socials and everything. You can just EKO space ZU. I'm out there. So I'd love to just hear from anybody. Just drop a line, say hello if you have any questions. I'm here to build relationships. And yeah, I mean, we really just want to be supportive for each other out there in the ether. And just be awesome to hear from anybody who this conversation had a positive impact on.
Love, I will probably talk to you again very soon about our awesome release. It's going to be high fives galore. But for now, here is a digital high five through the computer.
Wow. Cool.
Wear masks. We're almost through it.
That's right.